Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, and we are about to go live. Let me just make sure that we are live on Instagram and we will get started here. Give it a second. It's connecting. Give it a second. And we are live on Instagram. Okay, we're good to go. We're live on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and this will be posted later in podcast form. Oh, let me get this off the screen. My apologies. 1 second here, and we'll get started. There we go. That's what we want. That's what we want. Okay. Welcome to Prophecy and Politics. We talk about the things that you are not supposed to talk about, which are the only things that are of interest, right? Prophecy, so religion and politics, current events, really. Those are the things they tell you don't talk about. What do you want to talk about? The weather? No, we are going to talk about the things that are interesting. So today, let's get right into it. Our topics are going to include, I said in the show notes, the Indian invasion. That's going to ruffle some feathers. I don't hate Indian people. Let me be clear up front. But we're going to talk about that. The Indian invasion. This is going to be, if you don't pay attention to the news, by the way, follow me on X if you want to know what's going on in the news. You're going to get all the main headlines from there. But if you don't know what that's talking about, that is referring to the H-1B visa controversy that has, resurfaced the last couple of days, basically importing large amounts of foreigners to replace Americans. And the majority of them, a large percentage, come from India. Okay, we're going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel canceled and then uncanceled. And the left is freaking out, of course, about that. It looks, as of now, it looks like the terrorists are getting their way. He was canceled, and then a ABC station was shot up by a crazy leftist lunatic, and now he's uncanceled. So that is what is getting that's what's deciding what's happening in this country today. The left freaking out and shooting up TV stations. It's insane. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk in general about the reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. Now, I have been gone for a few days. I got very sick. Right after the Charlie Kirk death, I was basically, I was in shock for a couple days, right? I think a lot of us were. RIP to Charlie Kirk, and my prayers have been with his family. And I was just shocked for a few days. I was just, sit there scrolling the news. What's going on? Did they catch this guy? They did. They caught him. We'll talk about that as well. The conspiracy theories around his death. You know what? Let me say up front, I love conspiracy theories. I am, question the moon landing, and I don't believe the official story of 9/11. The JFK stuff is clearly, the official story is clearly a lie. This stuff, just because conspiracy theories are sometimes true doesn't mean they're always true. You have to use common sense. And the conspiracy theories around Charlie Kirk's death are ridiculous. The official story this time is true. I'm sorry, it is. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe that's not as exciting as some of the nonsense that's coming from people like Candace Owens. We're going to talk about that. If you're a Candace Owens fan, I'm not here to attack you, but we got to talk about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Anyway, I was sick. I couldn't do the live stream immediately after Charlie's death. I got very sick, and so I'm back now. But we're going to talk about the left's reaction, which has been insane to Charlie Kirk's death. We're going to talk about the conspiracy theories around that. We're going to ask the question, why can't white people have their own countries? Why is it that every other race can have their own countries? White people are not allowed to. And I don't even identify as white. I'm half Irish, in case you didn't know. I'm half Puerto Rican and Mexicans, a quarter each. Call myself a Puerto Rican. I don't even really identify as white. I was raised in a Mexican community, so that's kind of always where I've identified. In California, I've raised them around 90% Mexicans. where I'm from in Salinas, California. If you know anything about it, yeah, that's where I'm from. I was raised around Chicanos. But I just, it's obvious to me that white people are the only people that are not allowed to have their own country, and that's weird. So we're going to look at that, and that's related to the Indian invasion and so forth. And then, if we have time to get into all this, Charlie Kirk's martyrdom, and it was a martyrdom. Let me be very clear. It has proved once and for all, if you're paying attention, that this idea, which has been popular for decades now among Christians, among evangelicals, among even in my church, which I have some things to say about my church we probably won't have time to get into today, but this view of evangelism that has been popular in Christian circles for decades now is this kind of seeker-friendly model. You've heard of this, right? Let's water down the doctrine. Let's make everything, seeker friendly, which in theory is not necessarily a bad thing, but in practice, what it has turned into is really just watered down churches, and just everything is. It's the to put it one way, the salt has lost its saltiness among Christianity. And what has happened with Charlie Kirk's death is we have seen that theory has been put to rest, because the man who was bold and upfront in his faith, and the contrast between light and darkness, and he was very bold on his faith, that has led to such a uptick in interest in Christianity that I don't know if I've ever seen in my lifetime in this country. So all of this we're going to try and get into, but let's start with Jimmy Kimmel, canceled and then uncanceled. So I have, and but I will say this again, I've said it before, if you don't follow me on X, you should, because X is where you get the news coming out as it happens live, and I know where to find it. I follow a lot of good people who post the news, and so I repost stuff. And so if you want the news, you don't really need to go to the mainstream media. They're going to be hours and sometimes days behind. You probably should be on X. Not saying it's a perfect platform, but you probably should be there. And if you follow me, you will see I'm up on the news. I'm up on the latest stuff. So the Sinclair Group. So this is a media group that airs ABC affiliate stations all over the country. They have come out, and so to back up, Jimmy Kimmel lied on air. And maybe we should start with the fact that there's a lot of misinformation about what has happened with that whole story. What happened? There's a lot of, our libertarian friends, don't mean to attack you, and of course leftists who are saying, look, this is tyranny. The Trump administration is silencing free speech. First of all, you need to understand, a lot of people don't get this. ABC airs on the public airways. What does that mean? It's different than Fox News Network, although that's a hybrid, but we won't get into those details. Fox News, just for argument's sake, is a private network that they own their own airways. There is only so much broadband in the air that can be used for the TV. So what the government has done is they've stepped in and said, look, in order to make it so that we don't have like one group monopolizing all of the broadband airways that can be used to broadcast TV stations, this is when we didn't have things like satellite and so forth when these kind of rules were created. But in order to deal with the limited amount of broadcasts that we have in the air, where there's only so much broadband that you can use to transmit TV signals, the government's going to take control and divvy it up, and some of it will be given as will be kept as public airways. Others will be owned privately. The private networks can do what they want, generally speaking, and that's where you're talking like HBO, Fox News. These are private broadcast networks that can do what they want, and they're not under all the same rules under the FCC. There are some rules, but not under. That's why you can be, at least in the 90s, you could be more risky on HBO, right? Because it's not under the same rules. If you want HBO, you pay for it, right? And so the assumption is if you're paying for that, you want to see what they put on there, and so they can do what they want. They can put risque stuff on there, and there's news networks who do that as well. So Fox News, for example, it's private. ABC is different. ABC and some of these others, I think it's NBC, and there's a group of, kind of the traditional like news broadcast stations we think of. A lot of those are on the public airwaves. Public airwaves. Meaning, because they have chosen, which they can change their mind and they can become like Fox if they want to, they can become private. But because they have chosen to be on those airwaves, they are under regulations. These airwaves are given to these networks to provide a service, the service being the news. And when you go on those airwaves, you are not allowed to misuse them. And so they are under FCC regulations. Now, if you ask me, I'd get rid of a lot of FCC, the organization of the FCC, because it's often throughout the years been used by the left to silence the other side. But that's another discussion. So ABC's on there. They agree to these rules. They're on the FCC, under the FCC rules. And one of the rules is you cannot lie over the air about a crime. It's the law. It's a regulation of the FCC. That's what Jimmy Kimmel did. Okay? So he broke FCC regulations. And there's a lot of, there's people on who agree with me that Jimmy Kimmel should be taken off of the air, off of these airwaves. He can go on HBO or some other one, right? He can do his own podcast. He can do a bunch of other things. He can do his YouTube channel, and he can do what Tucker Carlson's doing, right? Which, by the way, has Tucker been silenced by getting kicked off of Fox, basically? No, he's not silenced. So this idea that this is somehow the start of a dictatorship under Trump, Tucker's bigger now than when he was on Fox. I think his reach is bigger. But Jimmy Kimmel was taken down because he broke FCC rules. He lied about a criminal case. He came on the air and said something that is obviously false, that the assassin of Charlie Kirk was MAGA, was on the right. Now let's talk about this very briefly and just go over the simple facts that we know. People on the left will say, well, yeah, that's true because the shooter was, his family was conservative and he was raised in a Mormon church. Okay, that's their argument. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the end of their argument. Done. Okay, let's look on the other side of the argument here. It becomes overwhelming to disprove that theory. The shooter's family, so these people, these MAGA people that the left is talking about, which I have no doubt that they were conservative, his family says that the shooter was a leftist and was getting extreme in his leftist views. Okay, so you're going to ignore the testimony of his own family? The shooter put leftist kind of manifesto political theory stuff engraved on the cartridges of his weapon. Okay, that's pretty obvious what's going on here. He killed a leader of the conservative movement. And in doing so, he called him a fascist. This is leftist language. These are leftist actions of an extremist on the left. He had a trans boyfriend who is into furry stuff. And apparently, and this is what the FBI is looking at now, he had a whole bunch of connections to the left on social media. That's pretty clear to me. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming that he was on the left. Overwhelming. The idea, oh, okay, his family was MAGA. He must be MAGA. How many kids rebel against their family and take a different ideology? The idea that you have to be whatever your family was is ridiculous. And then his family says that he became a leftist. So this is all pretty well known, pretty public. The FBI has not been hiding this stuff, and yet Jimmy Kimmel comes on the air and says that the shooter was MAGA. He's lying about a crime that is a violation of FCC and regulations, and so he's taken off the air, and rightly so. And I applaud this. And if you're worried about Trump being a dictator, I mean, come on, guys. This is the left kicked Trump off of social media. You're worried about Trump becoming a dictator? Do you realize how many people are allowed to just spew nonstop nonsense about him every day? And he's not cracking down on these people. They're allowed to do it. Jimmy Kimmel, like I said, he could go to HBO or whatever. He could go do a podcast if he wants, but he's not allowed to do that on the public airwaves, which is a very specific type of TV station. It's not every TV station. He could do it on other TV stations. So the left is freaking out. Now, the left and we have seen since the death of Charlie Kirk, we have seen the left freak out and be exposed in a way that really we haven't seen since Trump first was elected, the freak out on the left. And they are showing themselves for who they are by cheering the death of a moderate. Charlie Kirk was a moderate. He wasn't an extreme guy at all. He was a moderate. And I'll give you a couple examples. There is a restaurant in the region where I'm from. It's this restaurant called, and they have tried to cover this up, by the way. So if you get this, you can look into the fact that they have tried to cover this up. A restaurant called Boulevard Cafe in Sarasota, Florida. BLVD Cafe, Sarasota, Florida. The owner on their Instagram account apparently posted this disgusting message attacking Charlie right after his death on their Instagram account with a picture. This is the owner of a restaurant with a picture of him being shot in the neck, graphic picture on Instagram. And then, they in the comments, they're just getting destroyed, locked their account, posted an apology on their stories. I have screenshots of all this, but I don't have them at my fingertips. I won't make you guys wait while I look. Posted an apology in their stories, kind of a curt, not really apology, but kind of apology. I'm sure you've seen hundreds of examples of things like this. And then, so in the comments, everyone on Instagram is like, hey, let's hit these people with bad reviews. Their Yelp and their Google reviews got flooded with conservatives and people who are just mad at why would you do something so disgusting, giving them bad reviews, like something 200-300 reviews, screenshots of what was on their account. Now, subsequently, this person tried to claim that their account was hacked. So you're telling me someone hacked your account, posted this, by the way, and they're clearly leftist. If you go to this restaurant, you'll see the pride flags in front of the restaurant, whatever. Clearly leftist, but somebody hacked your account and posted this celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk in a disgusting, distasteful way. And then that person who hacked your account also went and said that, gave an apology in your stories. We're supposed to believe this? Okay. But apparently they went to Yelp and Google reviews and fought this and got all of the negative reviews removed. So Yelp and Google reviews are helping these people who are dancing on the grave of Charlie Kirk, They're helping them cover that up. Do you remember anything like that happening to conservatives, where we have massive organizations like Yelp and Google reviews helping to hide our crimes, helping to hide our disgusting behavior? That never happens to the right. We never get that kind of benefit of the doubt. But all their negative reviews are gone, and the Yelp account was locked, so you can't read anymore. You can't put any more reviews on there. I know, I left one. I can still see my review myself, but nobody else can see it. So maybe that'll get unlocked at some point and people can put negative reviews on there again. I'm hoping. But for now, that's what happened. So the left got exposed as just being the ghouls that they are with the Charlie Kirk death. But here's the thing, and this is why I think we may be headed toward a civil war in this country. And that is because the left has never had to deal with this before. Something like Jimmy Kimmel being canceled, and something like hundreds of leftists across the country, probably thousands, being fired for rightly fired for their disgusting behavior. Disgusting behavior. And they are freaking out about it. They are freaking out about the fact that they've never tasted this kind of pushback before. They've never tasted it before. They are like a child whose parents never tell them no, and all of a sudden they go to, strict auntie's house or something like that, right? It was like, I'm not putting up with this crap. You're not going to, badmouth me, or, all this kind of, throwing tantrums and all. And the left has never had to deal with this before, and they are flipping out over it. They don't know what to do. And so I think what we're seeing in this country, and what we're going to continue to see, is the right is finally disgusted enough with the left's behavior. I wouldn't say, because our side is still too kind, still too nice, still too tolerant, but we're disgusted enough that you would dare to dance on the grave of a good man, of a man who was willing to have conversations with you people, to sit down and have discussions with, and did that for a living, and was actually very kind to them. If you watch some of these clips, he's pretty kind to these ignorant college students that he was debating with day after day. But the fact that he would be killed, and then you would celebrate his death, and now you're mad that you're getting any pushback from this. I think what's happening is the right is finally like, look, this is disgusting. We are going to get you fired for this. And we are going to, like normal people, we are going to celebrate his life. We're going to have memorials. There should be more memorials to Charlie Kirk in this country by far than there are to George Floyd, which, by the way, have you heard this? George Floyd and Charlie Kirk, because the comparisons came immediately, right? There was memes of, here's our hero, Charlie Kirk, here's your hero, George Floyd, and George Floyd is, a drug addict who threatened pregnant women with a gun to their pregnant bellies. I mean, this is he died of an OD, and I've said before, I'll say again, Chauvin did not kill him, and that police officer is wrongly imprisoned and should be pardoned and released. Left would freak out about that, but I don't care. He followed police procedures, and we were lied to about his death. The angle of the picture that we were shown hides the fact that his knee was on the guy's shoulder, not his neck. It was a lie the whole time. Go look it up. Go find the picture. Good luck finding it on Google. But the picture was, he had his knee on the guy's shoulder, not his neck. And he was saying, I can't breathe, while he was sitting in the car before he even got pulled out of the car. It's just something that they say to get, special treatment or whatever. He OD'd. Anyway, so he's the left's hero, this drug addict who OD'd, who threatened pregnant women. And on the right is our hero, a martyr, a Christian martyr who just wanted to have conversations and try to persuade people peacefully. Did you know that they were born on the exact same day, 20 years apart exactly? Talk about, I don't know. Sometimes God just does that. What does that mean? I don't know. But the contrast, sometimes these contrasts showed up. And who's the other one? Greta Thunberg. And this is a fact. They were born on, same day. Greta Thunberg and um, Kyle Rittenhouse, born on the exact same day. And so you see these contrasts between left and right, and kind of their respective champions, so to speak. So the left is flipping out, and they're going to continue to flip out because they are children who don't know how to deal with having to behave right in a normal society. And so they are going to continue to attack the monuments to Charlie Kirk and attack. They protested his funeral. What kind of ghoul protests a funeral? They're going to continue with that kind of behavior. I mean, they shot up a news station, ABC station, for pulling Jimmy Kimmel off the air for 3 days. They're going to continue that behavior because that's who they are. That's who they are. They're going to continue to flip out over any type of limits to their insanity. And the right is being, the average right wing, just kind of, normie Republican who doesn't realize how crazy they are, is being exposed more and more every day to how crazy these people are. And they are going to push back. And they're going to be forced, because the left, we have a crisis in this country of trans violence. We have a crisis of trans violence in this country. This is something that in the past was rightly designated as a mental health issue. It should be again. And, there used to be a Wikipedia page discussing the connections between transvestites and violent crime. I mean, that's kind of the whole thesis behind the old movie Silence of the Lambs. Crazy person, right, in that story. And that's the idea. And these people, there is so much violence among the, that's why I'm glad that Trump has finally come out and said he's going to designate Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Should have been done years ago. I'm glad he's doing it now. Should have been done years ago. But as the crackdown on these people happens, and there's the interplay between these two groups is the interplay between the trans community, so to speak, and Antifa groups is massive. And as these people get cracked down on, they are going to so many of them are going to violently lash out, because the mental illness on that side. And at some point, we're going to have to go back to the times where this was considered a mental illness and people are involuntarily institutionalized. We're going to have to go back. We have no choice. You can either do that, or you can have a chaos in society and tyranny of terrorists like this. We have no choice. The right is trying to be nice about it, but we have no choice. And so we are going to continue. They are going to freak out, and we're going to continue to say, all right, enough. You are not allowed to just shoot our leaders, our cultural leaders, for just having discussions. You're not allowed to do that. And as they get cracked down on, they're going to continue to flip out. As Trump, which I wholeheartedly is behind him on this, as he goes into cities like Chicago and all these, in Memphis, and these hellholes that are ran by Democrats, these little pockets of chaos in blue cities across this country, as he goes in and cracks down on the crime there, the left is going to freak out, and they're going to push back, and their way of pushing back is flipping out violently. And so that is going to continue to escalate. And If they're doing this now under Trump, who I believe is just a moderate, I would go I would go way farther than Trump is going. If they're doing that now, and if they're doing it to people like Charlie Kirk, who again is a moderate, I agree with Charlie Kirk on 90% of the time. The only times I've criticized him in the past is when I was more far right than he was on certain issues, which I'm not going to now because, the man's funeral was just yesterday. And so it's not the point. He was a great man, and I don't want to talk about my disagreements with him right now. But I was more extreme than he was, is the point. If the left is freaking out over people like that, I would say a large portion, maybe not the majority, but a large portion of people on the right are more extreme in their views than Charlie was. He was a moderate. So how is the left going to deal with that? How are we going to have a country? How can you coexist with people who celebrate the death of moderates on the other side? You can't do it. You can't do it. And so and I do believe, and I can't go into all the prophetic parts behind this because it would take too much time. I can go into it another time. It would take too much background information. But I do believe that history repeats itself. What's the old saying? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? And so I do think that the events that led to the Civil War, some of that is going to repeat. The Civil War that happened in the 1800s, to some degree, that's going to repeat just before the end of time, which I believe we're very much near the end of time, prophetically speaking. I think there's going to be a repeat of that. And I, for various reasons, there's the political reasons, which I just laid out, but I also think that Satan is behind this stuff. And, if you don't understand that, I recommend watching my YouTube series, The New World Order and Bible Prophecy. And I go into it in detail. Hold on to your hats if you watch it. It's not for the faint of heart. I go into Revelation, and it's intense stuff. But I do believe that one of the powers that be, one of their goals has always been or has been since this country started, to destroy the American experiment. And one of the ways that the powers that be, Satan and his minions that rule the world, which doesn't mean all politicians. There's a few good ones. I'm like, when I say that, I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about like CIA and organizations that are, globalist organizations, so forth. I think one of their goals has been to destroy Western civilization because it is this shining example of what we used to call WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and that shining example of a country. That's what made America great. This kind of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority. That has been the target of the enemy for a couple hundred years now. And one of the ways that the enemy has sought to weaken America is to kill large numbers of the males in Western countries. The Protestant young men who are the leaders of those countries. And how do you do that? Well, you do that with war. So the Civil War was part of it. I think World War I and World War II, aside from the political reasons, which there are, there's political reasons behind those wars, but behind that, the pulling the strings kind of idea behind that was Satan wanting to kill large numbers of the men in those populations and slowly change those. And it's taken multiple generations to do this. I mean, how many good young men were lost in order to fight these wars? And then you import a bunch of third world foreigners to replace them, and thus change those countries, and thus take over those countries who are still powerful and still in leadership. You just replace the population, and now you have a new population that runs those countries. And so instead of directly competing with those powerful leading Western nations, you just take them over. And that's been the devil's plan for generations. I truly believe that. And I think we're heading toward another one of those because of the reasons I laid out. All right. Let's keep moving here. I have a lot to cover. I don't know how much of this we're going to be able to get into. Let's talk about Candace for a second, since just to kind of wrap a bow on the Charlie Kirk stuff, because I mentioned it earlier. Let me give you but okay, so Sinclair is not going to post. We'll wrap this up. Jimmy Kimmel's show, Sinclair Broadcasting Group's not going to do it. Next Star Media Group is going to do the same. They're going to, at least temporarily, ABC is going to run the show, but the broadcast company is simply not going to air it. They're going to air something else. Southern Poverty Law Center's ties to Antifa. I think that's something that Trump needs to. There's a whole terror network on the left that we have allowed to grow for years, and we've funded with our tax dollars through NGOs. And Trump is finally going to crack down on it, and they're going to flip out. Okay, there's the recent. Last night, Trump did a. This is. I'm recording this on Tuesday, the 23rd. Last night, Trump did a news conference on Tylenol and the relationships with autism, which, by the way, the memes on X have been incredible from that, but that's another subject. Sometimes you got to make light of some of this stuff. This world is so dark. You got to crack a joke here and there, even though it is a sensitive subject. Okay, I'm not going to go into all this. Let's talk about Candace for a second. Like I said, I would. Candace Owens has come out and suggested, I have, if you're watching this, these are just my bookmarks, my news stories. So I keep track of the news stories on X and I bookmark them, which is why you should follow me on X, because I have all these sources. Candace Owens has suggested that Israel is behind his murder. She says she didn't say that, but if you pay attention, she's done everything but say that. She's led to it. So it's just dishonest for her to say, oh, I didn't say that. Whatever. But she is now suggesting that perhaps he was not shot from, instead of looking up, we need to look below, that he was not shot from above, but from below, that there are tunnels underneath him and that maybe he was shot from below. This is absolutely absurd. Let me put it this way. If you're a Candace Owens fan, I'm going to try not to bag on her too much, because I know a lot of people out there like her. I will say I used to be employed by what used to be her organization, Blexit. I'm very familiar. I won't go into the details of that for reasons I won't discuss. I can't. But I will simply say that I was the founder of the California state chapter of Blexit. I was the state director, the first state director. So in a sense, you could say I was the founder of that chapter, whatever, so to speak. I was the first state director, and I grew it. I basically started it and grew it. And I was so successful in doing that they made me the regional director of Blexit. So I was the director of the Western states. It was my job. That's the job of a regional director. This is not anything that's not public information, so I can share this. It was my job to establish chapters in the Western states. There was 4 regions at the time. I don't know how they do it now. So, roughly a quarter of the country. Establish chapters in the Western states for Blexit and run them. Oversee the state chapters. So I'm familiar. But there's a lot of Candace fans I know who will probably listen to the show. I have been a Candace fan in the past. The stuff that she has been saying recently, and especially around Charlie Kirk's assassination, has been shocking and distasteful and unfounded. And I'll talk about that in a second here. I think it's highly inappropriate immediately after his death to come out with wild conspiracy theories that are unfounded. Again, I'll talk about the details in a second. And I don't want to talk about the details, but we have to because of people like Candace. And there's others, Owen Schroyer, so forth. Which, by the way, I'm not saying these people are horrible people completely and everything they say is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But on this one subject, can we? They didn't even wait till his funeral to, how do I put this? When you make wild conspiracy theories, you get attention. So for example, if you come out there and say, hey, I can prove that Bridget Macron is a man, which is something that Candace has been saying, you get attention for that. Is that the most important thing that conservatives should be looking at right now? No, but it gets you attention. And because it gets you attention, eyeballs equal dollars. Candace, I will say her husband is worth like at least 180 million. And yet if you watch her show, you will see how often she asks for money. And you can go to her website and you can pay to have like a 15-minute conversation with her. It's the amount of time she begs for money it's with how much money she has is absurd. Okay. People are going to get mad at me just for saying that. It's true. I'm sorry. It's true. This stuff, let's talk about, and I hate to do this, so let me try and do this briefly. The Charlie Kirk assassination, they got the guy. Just because some conspiracy theories are true doesn't mean every conspiracy theory is true. Again, I generally like conspiracy theories. You want to contrast this with the legit one? Contrast it with the JFK assassination. And I hate to talk about these details, but we have to because she is such a big microphone. So many people on the right are getting misled by this. And my prediction, within a couple weeks, you're going to see maybe even Erica Kirk, but more people on the Turning Point, in the Turning Point organization, are going to come out and say, Candace, stop it, or this is wrong, or just, agree with the official story, generally speaking, and thus in a nice way say that she's wrong. Let's talk about the details. Let's contrast the JFK assassination to the Charlie Kirk assassination, the stories. I hate to do this, but we have to because of these crazy theories that Candace is putting out there. The official story with the JFK assassination, if you watch the video, he is shot from the front, his head goes back. Bullet wound, exit wound out the back. Very obvious. The official story is basically the opposite. That he shot from the back. It doesn't make any sense that the exit wound would be in the back and that his head would go back. That right there, boom, that's enough. The official story is a lie. And then there's the magic bullet theory and all this kind of stuff. And there's the connections between their lone shooter, their Patsy, Oswald, these connections to the CIA and all this kind of stuff. A lot of this has come out more recently, but even back then, you just use your eyeballs and you could tell just from the video of JFK's assassination, the official story was a lie. That is not the case with the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's not the case. What you saw with your eyeballs, and I saw a close-up of the video. I don't recommend it. I saw it once. I don't need to see it again. And I don't want to talk about this a lot. But because it was horrible. It was traumatic. It was shocking. But he was shot from the front. He went back. He was shot in the neck from the front. His body went back. The entrance hole was very small in the front. Entrance holes are small. Exit wounds are large. The entrance wound was small. And then there was a lot of blood because he got shot in the artery, basically, the neck. And he went back. That fits what we saw on camera. Shooter was on the roof. Video of him on camera. Shooter running as everyone's scared and flipping out right after. He's running on the roof. We have video of that. We have video of him jumping off the roof. If you are careful and you look carefully on that, you will see he had the rifle with him when he jumps off the roof. People say, oh, there's no video of him with yeah, there is. You just got to look a little carefully. He had it wrapped in a towel, apparently, and he jumps off the roof with it. He probably hurt his leg when he jumped off, and he's limping later on. There's video of him walking down the street later on. He goes and hides his rifle somewhere. He's walking down the street. They have video of him from Ring cameras in people's front of people's houses. They see him walking in the neighborhood, and he's limping. And then his parents turn him in. And then we have the text exchange, which everyone's, oh, what, that doesn't sound natural. But it sounds natural enough to me. I don't know what you people are talking about. Oh, there's capitalization in the text messages. He capitalized some of the letters at the beginning of sentences. That's correct punctuation. Teens don't tweet like that. What are you talking about? You do know how iPhones work, right? You do know that the majority of phones, text message apps, will automatically capitalize the first letter for you. And when you look in it, sometimes there's capitalized in the text messages, sometimes it's not. To me, it seems very, I don't think it was faked. If anything, you could argue, well, maybe they had this conversation between him and his trans furry boyfriend. Maybe he had this conversation as a way to kind of publicly take the heat off of the boyfriend and make it seem like the boyfriend had no idea. I do believe that there's other people behind this that helped him, but there's no need to be, oh, this had to be a professional hit. No, it didn't have to be 200 yards. I'm sorry, Charlie's security was not that great. It should have been better. That was not great security. The whole plane thing, there was a plane that disappeared, and that turned out that's false. That didn't happen. So these wild conspiracy theories, no, it's pretty clear that was the kid who did it. All the evidence, we got him on camera. His parents turned him in. What do you want, guys? I know it's more exciting sometimes to think of some grand conspiracy theory, but this time the official story is true. Now, if you think that the FBI somehow made this story up, tell me how, and I'll end it on this because I don't want to talk about this, but we have to because of these conspiracy theories. If the FBI made this story up and they're somehow behind it, because that's what Candace is suggesting. She said Fed level conspiracy, which gets clicks. If that was true, why would the FBI do it in a way that makes them look like idiots? That doesn't make any sense. What they did is they twice within the few hours after the assassination, they came out and they said, we got the guy, and they got the wrong guy twice. We got him. They tweeted that. Kash Patel tweeted it. We got the guy. Oops, that wasn't him. We got the guy. Oops, that wasn't him. Twice. They looked like idiots. And they didn't even finally catch the guy. Instead, the guy's dad turned him in. So if the FBI was going to fake this story, they would make themselves into heroes. Instead, they look like bumbling idiots. And this just fell into their lap. So the official story, I believe it. And I believe there was probably people, and that's a straw man that people say, oh, they say it's a lone gunman theory. Actually, no one says that. No one says that. Yeah, there was a lone person who pulled the trigger, but he probably had a lot of people helping him who had advanced knowledge of this information, because that is on social media. There was multiple people before the shooting who seemed to know what was going on and posted about it. So there was probably a network this kid was working with, a leftist network. So what should we be focusing on right now? We should be focusing on trans violence and Antifa and these violent leftist networks. Trump designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. That should be the focus. What are people like Candace Owens and Owen Schroer doing? They're saying, that's all false. Let's focus on what? Israel? Why are we talking about Israel right now? By the way, I am not a fan of the nation state of Israel. I don't hate Jewish people. My Messiah, Jesus, was Jewish. But that country, I'm not a fan of them. I'm not a fan of that government. And you can look on my X account and see me constantly criticize that government. But not every conversation needs to be about them. Even Nick Fuentes, which I'm not a fan of Nick Fuentes, but he's very much opposed to Israel. I don't listen to this guy at all. I don't like him. He seems like a horrible person, but he's very much opposed to Israel. And even he is like, come on, guys. You're blaming Israel on this? So, okay, I'm going to move on now. That's what I got to say about that. Okay, let's talk about a lighter subject. It's not lighter. I'm joking. Let's talk about the Indian invasion. Okay, or the invasion in general of a foreigner taking our job. So here is, have you heard this story? Doctor comes from Pakistan. In the middle of an operation, he leaves the patient. So the patient, whatever, the patient's open. I don't know what kind of surgery this was. The patient's it's in the middle of an operation. This doctor's supposed to be performing. I don't know if the guy's cut open already or whatever, but he's in the middle of an operation. And the doctor decides he's going to leave the patient on the operating table and go have sex with the nurse. Pakistani foreign doctor. Dr. Anjum is his name. He's not even fired. He's not even fired. This is in the UK. But he's not even fired. They say, oh, it was an one-off error of judgment. The guy should remove his license. He should be deported. What are we doing? Okay. What does this have to do with okay, well, it has to do with the H-1B scandal. So Trump has come out, the administration has come out, and if you were paying attention the last few days, you know that they've come out and there was a debacle where they said that there will be a new fee on these foreigners who come to America to take our jobs, H-1B visa holders. And it'll be $100,000 a year. And we were cheering on the right because that would put an end, effectively, for the most part, to using these visas to replace American workers in professional jobs, like in tech jobs and so forth. Some of the professional jobs in this country, which are what the middle class use to rise up out of poverty, traditionally in this country, we have been giving those jobs to foreigners to undercut American wages. And we've been doing it since the H-1B program was started in 1990. And it's disgusting. And so when this news came out that the administration is going to now charge a fee of $100,000 per year, and if you want to bring in a foreigner to take an American job, you have to pay $100,000 a year in order to bring that foreigner over on these visas. And we cheered because it's going to, obviously companies are not going to do that. They're going to say, look, it costs $100,000. Then we got to pay this guy on top of that, whatever his wages are. Maybe it's 150 or whatever. It's going to be too expensive. And companies will only do that for the best and the brightest around the world, which is what these visa programs are supposed to be used for, but they're not. They're used to undercut American wages. So when we heard this news, the administration is going to charge this fee, we cheered. The next day, the administration came out and said, no. Yes, even though we said it was $100,000 per year, it's not. It's only $100,000 one time per visa. And you can have an H-1B visa for 3 years, then you can renew it for another 3 years. So that's divide 6 years by 100,000. That's not much. That's not much money at all. Now you're talking what? 15 grand a year? That's nothing for these major corporations who are replacing American workers. And on top of that, the news came out today. So these new rules are a betrayal of the American worker. Sorry, but it is. I call it like I see it. When the administration does good things, I'll cheer it. Like, designating Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. That's a good thing. This, bad thing. On top of no, it's not $100,000 per year. Now it's only $100,000 once. On top of that, now the White House is saying that they might just waive the fee entirely for doctors on H-1Bs. So now we're talking guys like this. Dr. What's his name again? Kunjab. What's his name? No, Anjum. Dr. Anjum. Guys like this is a UK doctor, but it's the same idea, from Pakistan. These guys are going to get they might just get a waiver completely. No fee to come in and take the jobs of Americans. So you're an American, you're a young person, and I want to talk more about how we are screwing our young men in this country, left, right, and center. You're an American, you do everything right, you have good grades, young person, you go to college, the social contract is, if I work hard and I have good grades and I go to school and I get a good degree, I'm not some stupid underwater basket weaving degree, but I get a good degree. I go for med school. And then you come out and now you have to compete with Dr. Anjum from Pakistan in order to get a job. And Dr. Anjum will take the job and get paid less. And so now your wages are artificially brought lower. And that's just in the medical field. You look in the tech industry and these kids can't find a job. They go to school, they get their degree in computer science, whatever it is. They come out, they can't find a job because these tech companies are hiring all these people from overseas to take their jobs, because they will pay them less. Those people will work for less. On top of that, they take the spots in schools. So you can't even get into school in some of these degrees because the schools would rather have a foreigner come in and pay full tuition rather than in-state tuition for an American. They'd rather take the higher wages or the higher tuition rate from a foreigner and have them take the spots in the schools for the professional degrees. So we are screwing our young people. They can't get good jobs. Inflation is through the roof. They're having to pay Social Security, which they will never see, which to a generation, which this is not meant to attack boomers, but boomers are doing far better financially. Young people are having to pay Social Security to them while that generation's more wealthy than they are. You look at the amount of homes that are owned by 70-year-olds versus 40-year-olds, and it's not even close. We are failing our next generation. And the H-1B thing is just part of it, but it's a huge part. And so they need to at least bring back this $100,000 a year fee. And I will say, for those who are mad at me for criticizing the administration on this, I think we need to change our view of politicians. Majority of you do not know these politicians. They are not your personal friend. You need to stop viewing them as your personal friend and view them as what they are, which is public servants who will do the bidding of whoever is the loudest, demanding they do their bidding. Demand more. I understand, don't criticize when it's an election year. It's not even election year. Criticize. Demand more. Okay. Indian invasion. So we are getting overrun in this country by people from third world countries, including India. I said at the beginning, I don't hate Indian people. I don't. I've known some Indian people in the past that have been very cool people, individuals. So I'm not talking in general about all, but if you know Indian culture, and that's the problem. If you know Indian culture, you know that it is not a high trust society. And when you bring third world people over and you flood them into this country, which is a high trust, and Western countries in general, which are high trust societies, they destroy it. They can destroy it overnight. And that is, I think, the goal of the powers that be. to destroy Western civilizations. Here's an example of, this person runs a farm stand, one of these kind of, honor system. You go and you take eggs and you leave cash and no one's even there to watch you. And it's for the neighborhood. And here's this Indian person comes in and they steal the eggs and steal the money without leaving. This is the kind of stuff that happens in third world countries all the time. It's a dog eat dog world. And they come here and they're just like, you people are naive. And they just rip us off blind. And you can't import endless amounts of these people and expect to not ruin the country. Here's an example of the hatred that Indian people had a good reputation in this country. I have never seen another group of people destroy their reputation overnight as Indians have done in America. During the days of Apu on The Simpsons, nobody hated Indians. Say, oh, they're hardworking and they take care of their own. And we make jokes about every race because that's what we used to do when we were a normal country in the 90s, but it was not. Generally, most Americans, I think, had a favorable view of Indians. And this H-1B thing, the pushback that has come from Indians, the hatred of Americans that has come out from just a little pushback on stealing our jobs and running these visa mills where they just bring in the whole family, bring in all your friends, and then take over, because that's what's happened. If you don't know, they take over whole companies. That's what they've done. They take over whole companies and replace everyone in there with Indians. The pushback from the anger against Americans for daring to even try and slow down this invasion of third world people into this country, I think has destroyed the goodwill that a lot of Americans had toward Indian people. So here's Mamdani, who's running for mayor of New York City, and he's talking. His hatred of white people is pretty clear. He said that my mom made all the white actors in her movie play waiters. So if you were white in her movies, you had to be in the lower. You had to take the lower jobs. It's this reverse racism has become so big in this country that it's not, I use the term reverse racism, but it's just racism. But did you know this? This is interesting. And this is where I'll bring up the subject of why are white people not allowed to have their own country? Everyone else is except for white people. And I'll maybe end it on this because this is going to take some explaining. White people of European descent, the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that made this country, are the group that is the most attacked in this country today. Did you know that the Supreme Court in 1923, there was a case that came up, and it was basically a guy from a Indian background, and he was from the high caste in the Indian background. So, there's the caste system in India. Not officially anymore, but it's still definitely alive and well. This guy was from the high caste, so I think they're called the Brahmins. And he tried to argue that he was, he should be considered white. So there was a Naturalization Act of 1790 in the US, and that act said it was for white people. That used to be a law in America. We used to have laws saying, hey, if we're going to import a bunch of people, we want people that are similar to the race of the people who are already here. Now, Americans hear that, Christians hear that, and they flip out. Why does nobody get mad when Israel does that? Or any other country? Why does no one get mad? If you are in Israel, they have tests and rules about who can come to their country, who can come and become citizens in their country, because it's a Jewish state. And the idea is we understandably, if you want to come there, they want you to be Jewish. Now, there's exceptions, of course, but this is generally the rule. And that was generally the rule in America. This is understood to be a white country. You know, before 1980, this country was like 90% white. A lot of people don't realize that. 90% white. European, various European groups, but European. That's what this country was. It's a white country. Again, I say this as someone who's half Hispanic. It's just weird to me that white people are we're the only group that's not allowed to have their own. They are the only group that are not allowed to have their own country. Why? Nobody would blink twice at the idea that Mexico is for Mexicans and Japan is for the Japanese. And, name an African country, the Ethiopia is for the Ethiopians. Nobody blinks twice about that. But it's crazy, and just we immediately pull back in terror at the idea that there should be a white country that's for white people. Why? Why is it crazy, the idea that Ireland should be for the Irish, for example? It's a little bit more acceptable when we use those terms, right? Specific European countries. England for the English, blah, blah, blah. Although those countries are basically gone from legal immigration. Largely, those countries are, they've had so much of it, they've been overrun. And I will, later on in the week, I'll talk about the connections between that and punishments from God. Because I do think this replacement theology, even though it's something that should be fought and reversed, the replacement of Western civilization by third world invaders, it should be fought. It should be reversed. I do think it's a punishment from God for the secularism that has taken control and the debauchery that is rampant in Western civilizations. But it's not racist to say that Japan should be for the Japanese. Mexico should be for the Mexicans. That's not racist. Why is it only bad when it's white countries? And the reason why is because white people, because through our educational system and the media, have been indoctrinated for generations and told over and over and over again that to have pride in your country and to have a country that's generally homogenous of one racial group, generally, not completely, generally, that is, we've been told that for generations, that's evil in America. That has been equated to 1930s Germany, and so that is the greatest evil of all time. And so we naturally, we hear that and we're just horrible. When you stop and think about it, the way that God ordained things at the Tower of Babel, he divided the nations. God divided the nations. And he did it by ethnicity. And those groups, he did it by language, and those language groups became ethnic groups. And it's synonymous. The language, the ethnic group, and the nation. For most of human history, those things have been synonymous. The language group, the ethnic group, and the nation. A nation consists of a group of people who are largely the same ethnic group and speak the same language. That has been how it's been worked for hundreds and hundreds of years since the Tower of Babel. God established that. And I think generally speaking, that's a good thing and there's nothing wrong with it. That does not mean that you hate those other groups. It just means that Japan should be for the Japanese and France should be for the French. And yes, whatever, Libya should be for the Libyans. Ethiopia should be for the Ethiopians. There's nothing wrong with that. That was completely normal for most of human history. And you know where the exception is? Within the church. That's where the exception should be. And small exceptions in the country. I do think you can have a small version of a melting pot like we've had in America, as long as you still have the majority, the vast majority is homogenous ethnically and culturally. That's what I believe. Call me crazy. I believe that Japan should be for the Japanese. That's all I'm saying. Now just apply that to America. That's all I'm saying. I think the majority of people who made this country of European descent had a certain culture, that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I say that as somebody who's Puerto Rican and Mexican. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's racism to say that only white people are not allowed to have their country, a country. I think that's racism. You know what's crazy is just saying this, which should be obvious, is attacked. The exception should be within the church. Why? Because in Christ there is no male or female, there's no rich or poor, there's no slave, there's no free, there's no Greek, there's no Jew. In Christ, that's in the church. And so I think you can have somewhat of a melting pot in a country like America as long as two things exist. Number one, the majority of the country is the church. The majority of the country is Christian. If it's not going to work, because you can't have a high trust society without high trust individuals who are moral. That should make up the majority. And if it's no longer the majority, you're going to see breakdown of those different groups immediately. You know it's true. Whether you disagree with me or not, you know it's true. We're seeing the breakdown. And yeah, it should be the majority. That's the only way you can have a melting pot. If it stays the majority and the majority is Christian. The exception should be within the church, but generally speaking, countries are based on and should remain based on their ethnicities and their language. Doesn't mean you never let anyone else in. Doesn't mean you hate anybody. Doesn't mean you hate those other countries. Just means that this is natural and this is how it's been for hundreds and hundreds of years. And clearly, what we are doing right now, where we are, the powers that be are purposefully replacing their own population with people from third world countries, that's not working. Just go look at the amount of rapes that are happening in Western countries, in the UK and so forth. It's insane. You import people from those countries, and this is what you're going to get, because that stuff is normal in those countries. Yeah, here's some of the screenshots from the Supreme Court case on this in 1790. These rulings were overturned in 1965. Have things gotten better in this country since then? This is the kind of stuff, if you're watching on the screen, this is our university system. Here is in our media, post after post after post attacking white people. And this is coming, this hatred of white people is coming from our university system and from the media over and over and over again. And you can't have a country like this. The reason for this, again, is to attack Western civilization, to attack white Anglo-Saxon Protestant civilization, which I'm going to end. I'm going to end on this here. I'm going to remove this. But the goal, oops, bring myself back on the screen here. Here we go. The goal isn't even about race. It's not even about race. The powers that be hate Christianity. They hate Bible Christianity. And I will tell you that white Western civilization has become the vehicle, for whatever reason, that has been the tool that God is using to spread Christianity to the world. And because that's the case, that's the group that's being attacked. The satanic powers that be don't actually care about race. They don't. Their minions in the university system and in the media and so forth, they hate white people. But the ultimate, the powers that be, you look into like Freemasonry and so forth, and there's they don't care. They have Prince Hall Freemasons. They don't really care about race on the top. It's a tool that they're using to go after Christianity. But I will say that the invasion that's happening in this country of third world of people from third world, there's a difference, and I want to be sensitive to people who are listening to this who might be immigrants and so forth. There's a difference between the way an immigration system should work, which, by the way, the way it works in most other countries, like Mexico, for example. You have to have a certain amount of money. You have to, have degrees or something you're going to contribute to society before they allow you to come into their country. That's the way immigration is supposed to work. We'll take the best of the best. You have these high degrees. You have a bunch of money, so you're not going to mooch off of our social system when you come here and so forth. It's not meant to, we will take everyone and use our citizens' taxes to pay for your social services. You can't do that. You can't do that long term. That's how you destroy a country. And it doesn't help those people because they never learn to take care of themselves. But the way the immigration system should work is, let's take the best and the brightest from all different countries. And so you see people like, for example, that come from Nigeria. Nigerian immigrants thrive in America. And the Philippine immigrants thrive in America because we're taking some of the best of their country, right? I'm fine with that. And that kind of stuff does not lead to this social split that we're seeing in Western countries today. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying, let's keep everyone out. No, we just need to go back to normal instead of just flooding. Well, I just saw a story the other day. They're going to bring 40,000 Haitians into, was it Ohio? Indiana? No, I think it's Indiana. And the Republicans are leading this. You can't do that. Just masses and masses of people changes a country too quickly. The cultures are too different. And you're just dumping people on. It's a crime against the citizens who are already here. Nobody voted for this. All right. Hopefully I've given enough qualifiers so people don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't hate anyone. I think every racial group and every ethnicity should have their own country, and I wish that all those countries would thrive, and they should follow the example of Western civilization and do what we did in this country, and you will thrive as well. But just importing tens and tens of thousands of them into America is just going to turn this into a third world country. That's all it's going to do, and it's going to help the rich powers that be take advantage of cheaper wages, replace the local population, and eventually collapse those countries. And that's what they're trying to do. I think we discussed all the topics I wanted to look at today. So we'll wrap it up there. Follow on X and just look up my name, Josh Fontanilla on X, on YouTube, on Facebook, Instagram, and the audio of this will be posted on in podcast form on Apple and Spotify later. Like, share, subscribe, all those good things. And please comment if you disagree with me. You probably just needed to listen to the whole show. One last thing. Go look up what the Bible said about the Cretans, what Paul said about the Cretans, before you get mad at me about stereotypes. All right, we'll leave it there. Go look what Paul said about his own people. All right, I'm not going to go there. People will get mad at me. All right. God bless. We will see you on the next one. Hopefully it's tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in.